Hello students, myself Dr. Harpreet Kaur from Army Institute of Law Mohali. Today I will be discussing with you the topic of history and making of the Indian Constitution, a study. Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life and its spirit is always the spirit of age, quoted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Introducing the topic. The Indian Constitution, adopted on 26th of January 1950, is the culmination of centuries of evolution in administrative and legal systems. The historical context of Indian Constitution is deeply intertwined with the country's colonial past and the national struggle for independence. The British Raj introduced Western legal concepts and institutions which significantly influenced the administrative and judicial systems of India. The Regulating Act of 1773 and the Charter Acts laid the foundation for centralized governance and modern judiciary. The Government of India Act of 1858 transferred the control of Indian territories to the British Crown, establishing a Secretary of State for India and consolidating the British administration. The Indian Council Act of 1861 and subsequent acts in 1892 and 1909 gradually introduced legislative councils with Indian representation, albeit limited. The Montagu-Chelmsford Reform of 1919 and the Government of India Act of 1935 further expanded the participation of Indians in governance, although true self-governance remained elusive. The Indian national movement, led by Indian National Congress and other political entities, played a pivotal role in shaping the philosophical underpinnings of the Constitution. Figures like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel advocated for democratic principles, civil liberties and social reforms which were later reflected in the Constitution. Coming to the historical background of the Constitution. The chronicle event which led to the making of Constitution of India 1950 are as follow. First is 1934, the idea of Constituent Assembly. The idea of a Constituent Assembly of India was first proposed by M.N. Roy, a pioneer of the communist movement in India. This idea was to create a body that would draft a constitution for an independent India. Second was in 1935, the Congress formalizes the demand. The Indian National Congress, the principal party in the Indian freedom struggle, officially demanded a Constituent Assembly to draft India's constitution. This demand signified the Indian aspiration for self-rule. The third is 1938 Nehru's Declaration. Jawaharlal Nehru, a central figure in Indian politics, declared that Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference and should be based on adult franchise. Next is in year 1940 the British acceptance. The British government through the August offer acknowledged the Indian demand for a Constituent Assembly, marking a significant step towards Indian self-governance. Next is in 1942 the Cripps Mission. The Cripps Mission proposed a draft constitution that was intended to grant India a dominion status, but it was rejected by the Muslim League, which demanded a separate nation for Muslims. Next is 1946, when Constituent Assembly elections and Cabinet Mission. The Cabinet Mission arrived in India to discuss the transfer of power. It proposed a single Constituent Assembly and elections were held, leading to the formation of Constituent Assembly. Then was in December 9, 1946, when the first meeting of Constituent Assembly was held. The Constituent Assembly met for the first time. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the President of the Assembly. Then on August 15, 1947, that is the Independence Day of India, India gained independence from British colonial rule. This event set the stage for Assembly to work on a constitution for a free and sovereign India. And on November 26, 1949, we adopted the Constitution. After many debates, discussions and amendments, the Constituent Assembly was adopted by the Constitution. This day is celebrated as Constitution Day in India. Then we have January 26, 1950, when our Constitution comes into effect. The Constitution of India came into effect, transforming India into sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and republic. This day is celebrated as Republic Day in India. These events mark the significant milestones in the journey of framing the Indian Constitution, reflecting the determination and aspiration of the Indian people for a democratic and independent nation. Now, I will be discussing with you the philosophical foundations. The philosophical foundations of the Indian Constitution are derived from a variety of sources, both indigenous and foreign. The ancient texts like Vedas, Upanishad and Arthashastras emphasize the concept of dharma and nyaya, which is a resonate with modern constitutional values. The Indian freedom struggle itself was a testament to the values of non-violence, civil disobedience and satyagraha, which emphasize the moral force of truth and non-violent resistance. These principles influenced the inclusion of fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy in the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly debates reveal a deep engagement with global political thought. The framers of the Constitution were influenced by the British parliamentary system, the Bill of Rights from the US Constitution, the Irish Constitution's directive principles and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man. The socialist principle from the Soviet Union also inspired the socio-economic rights enshrined in the directive principles. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, was a strong advocate for social justice and the annihilation of caste discrimination. His vision was instrumental in embedding the principles of equality and fraternity in the Constitution. The preamble of Constitution encapsulates the philosophical ethos of the nation, declaring India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic committed to justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. Thus, the historical context and philosophical foundation of the Indian Constitution are a confluence of India's indigenous heritage, colonial experience, nationalist aspiration and global democratic ideals. This blend has resulted in a unique document that has stood the test of time, guiding the world's largest democracy through various challenges and changes. Now, I will be discussing with you Constituent Assembly debates. The Constituent Assembly debates are a treasure trove of discussion that shaped the Indian Constitution. First is the preliminary stage, that is from December 1946 to January 1948. The Constituent Assembly initial meetings set the tone for constitution making process. The objective resolution moved by Jawaharlal Nehru outlined the aspiration and values of the future constitution, including sovereignty, democracy and social justice. Second is the committees and reports. Various committees were formed to address different aspects of the constitution such as fundamental rights, union parts and minorities. These committees presented reports that were debated and became the basis of constitutional provisions. Third is the drafting committee. It worked from August 1947 to November 1949. Headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the drafting committee synthesized the reports and debates into the draft constitution. This committee played a pivotal role in articulating the legal frameworks of the constitution. First step is the first reading, which was held in November 1948. The draft constitution was introduced to the assembly. This stage involved presenting the draft and setting the agenda for detailed clause by clause discussions. Next is the second reading, which was held from November 1948 to October 1949. The most extensive phase of the debates where each clause of the draft constitution was discussed, debated and voted upon. This period saw intense discussion on key issues like federalism, language and fundamental rights. Next stage is the third reading, which was held on November 1949. The final version of the constitution, after incorporating amendments from the second reading, was debated. The assembly members had the opportunity to express their views on the draft as a whole before it was put to vote. Next is the important stage, that is adoption of the Constitution on November 1949. On 26 November 1949, the Constituent Assembly formally adopted the Constitution. This day is commemorated as Constitution Day in India. Significance of the debates. The Constituent Assembly debates provides invaluable insights into the intentions of the framer, the philosophical underpinning and the practical considerations that went into the making of the Constitution. They are a reflection of the democratic process and the diverse perspectives that contributed to the formation of the Constitution. These debates were not just about legal and constitutional formulation, but also reflected the social and political ethos of the time. The discussions encapsulated the hopes and dreams of a newly independent nation and laid down the foundation principle that continue to guide India. The architect of the Indian Constitution, that is B. R. Ambedkar, his vision. Dr. B. R. Ambedkar, often referred to as a chief architect of the Indian Constitution, saw the Constitution not just as a legal document for governance, but as a vehicle for the nation's progress. He believed it should reflect the best of the country's past traditions while being resilient enough to meet present and future needs. Ambedkar's idea of the Constitution was to create a harmonious society where every individual lives with dignity and has the right to seek justice if their fundamental rights are violated. He also believed that the Constitution should be used as a tool for social reformation, helping to equalize the gap between different classes, which was essential for social solidarity and national integration. Dr. B. R. Ambedkar's vision for the Indian Constitution was deeply rooted in his commitment to social justice, equality and human rights. As the chairman of the drafting committee, he sought to create a legal framework that would empower the marginalized and ensure dignity for every citizen. Here are some key aspects of his vision. First is social justice. Ambedkar envisioned a constitution that would serve as a tool for social transformation, aiming to eradicate the centuries-old social hierarchies and inequalities prevalent in Indian society. Equality. He was staunch advocate for the rights of the depressed classes and saw the Constitution as a means to guarantee equal rights and opportunity for all, regardless of caste, religion or gender. Next is human dignity. Ambedkar believed that Constitution should safeguard the dignity of every individual and provide the rights to seek justice if their fundamental rights are violated. Next is progressive outlook. He wanted the Constitution to be flexible and resilient, capable of adapting to the changing needs of the society while maintaining its core principle. Next is democratic governance. Ambedkar's vision included a strong democratic structure that would be responsive to the people's need, with a significant emphasis on minority rights and representation. Next is the rule of law. He emphasized the importance of rule of law and an independent judiciary as a cornerstone of a democratic society. Dr. Ambedkar's contribution to the Indian Constitution reflect his profound understanding of the complexities of Indian society and his unwavering dedication to build a nation based on the principle of liberty, equality and fraternity. Now, I will be discussing with you Gandhian principle in constitutional design. Gandhi envisioned a decentralized polity and society, emphasizing the importance of village panchayat and a bottom-up approach to governance. He believed in a village-centric grassroots democracy where power was distributed evenly across all institutions. Gandhi recognition of cultural and religious autonomy, especially for minorities, influenced the Constitution's approach to protect the rights and identities of various religious and cultural groups within the nation. However, it has been noted that while Gandhi played a crucial role in the setting up of Constituent Assembly and influenced the constitution makers, his vision was not fully reflected in the Indian Constitution. The Gandhian provisions incorporated into the Indian constitutions are reflected in the directive principles of state policy. These principles, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, aims to guide the state in making laws and policies. The key Gandhian provisions incorporated in the Constitution are as follows. First is Article 40, that is Organization of Village Panchayats. Advocate for the self-governance through the establishment of local self-government in village. Next is Article 43, Promotion of Cottage Industry. Directs the state to promote cottage industry on an individual or cooperative basis in rural area. The third is Article 41, Right to Work. Asserts that the state shall make effective provision for securing the right to work, to educate and to public assistance in case of unemployment, old age, sickness and disablement. Fourth is Article 43A, Participation of workers in management. Encourages the state to take steps to promote the involvement of workers in the management of industries. Fifth is Article 45, Provisions for early childhood care and education. Ensure that children up to age of 6 years are provided with early childhood care and education. Sixth is Article 46, Promotion of educational and economic interest of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and other weaker section. Aims to protect these groups from social injustice and all form of exploitation. Next is Article 47, Duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living. It includes the improvement of public health as amongst its primary duty, and in particular to bring about the prohibition of intoxicating drinks and drugs. These provisions are non-justiciable, meaning they are not enforceable by the courts, but they serve as fundamental guidelines for governance and the establishment of a just society. Now, I will be discussing with you the drafting process of the Constitution of India. The Constitutional Advisors draft February-October to October 1947. P.N. Rao, the Constitutional Advisor, prepared an initial draft of the Constitution based on the reports from various committees and discussions in the Constituent Assembly. This draft was completed by October 1947. Second is the Drafting Committee formation, August 1947. The Constituent Assembly established the Drafting Committee on 29th August 1947, chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The committee was tasked with scrutinizing the draft constitution and preparing a final version for the Assembly. Third is Drafting Committee's work, October 1947 to February 1948. The Drafting Committee meticulously reviewed and revised Rao's draft, making significant changes and additions. The revised draft consists of 315 articles organized into 18 parts and its schedules. Fourth is Introduction of Draft Constitution, February 1948. The Drafting Committee presented the draft constitution to the Constituent Assembly. This draft was the basis for detailed discussions and further amendments. Fifth is the public feedback, that is from October 1947 to January 1948. The draft constitution was published in January 1948, inviting public feedback. Over 7,635 suggestions and amendments were received from the public, experts and various stakeholders. The second reading of the Constitution was held from November 1948 to October 1949. The Constituent Assembly engaged in clause-by-clause consideration of the draft Constitution. The stage involved extensive debates, during which 2,473 amendments were moved, considered and voted upon. Is the finalization and adoption, that is on November 1949. After incorporating the amendments, the final version of the Constitution was adopted by Constituent Assembly on 26th of November 1949. Enactment of the Constitution on January 1950. The Constitution of India came into effect on 26 January 1950, marking the birth of Indian Republic. The drafting process was characterized by its inclusiveness and attention to detail, ensuring that the Constitution reflected the diverse aspiration and values of the Indian people. It stands as a testament to the democratic ethos and collaborative spirit of the nation's founder. Now, I will be coming to sources of Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution has drawn features from various sources, reflecting a blender of indigenous and foreign influencer, which are encapsulated in the table herein given below. Now, first is the country of United Kingdom, and from United Kingdom we have picked the feature of parliamentary government, rule of law and legislative procedure, single citizenship, cabinet system, prerogative writs, parliamentary privileges, bicameralism. Second country is United States, we have picked fundamental rights, independence of judiciary, judicial review, impeachment of the president, removal of the Supreme Court and High Court judges, and post of vice president. Next, the Constitution of Ireland, we have picked directive principles of the state policy, nomination of the members of Rajya Sabha, method of election of the president. Next is Canadian Constitution, we have picked federation with the strong centre, vesting of residuary powers in the centre. Next is appointment of the state governors by the centre, advisory jurisdiction on the Supreme Court. Next is the Constitution of Australia, we have picked concurrent list, freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse, joint sitting of the two houses of parliament. Next is the Constitution of Germany, we have picked suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. From the Constitution of South Africa, we have taken procedure for amendment in the constitution election of members of Rajya Sabha. From the Constitution of France, we have republic ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity in the preamble. From Constitution of Soviet Union, that is USSR, we have picked the fundamental duties, that is ideals of justice, social, economic and political in the preamble. From Japan, we have taken procedure established by law. Additionally, the Government of India Act 1935 was a significant source providing the federal scheme, office of the governor, judiciary, public service commissions, emergency provisions and administrative details. Thus, the lengthiest written constitution consisting of 25 parts containing 470 articles and 12 schedules and 5 appendices have since been in force, instilling the constitutional principles of equity, justice and good conscience throughout the nation. Now, we will be coming to the landmark judgments. Judicial interpretation of the Constitution of India enlivens the law to be applicable practically in the nation, upholding the letters in their spirit of equity, justice and good conscience. The landmark Supreme Court judgments regarding the history and making of the Indian Constitution are enumerated as follow. First is A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, 1950, page number 88. This case dealt with the right to personal liberty under Article 21. The Supreme Court held that the protection under Article 21 was available only against arbitrary action by the state and not from the laws passed by the state. The second judgment is of Shankari Prasad versus Union of India. This is of 1951 Supreme Court, page number 89. The Supreme Court upheld the power of the Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution including the fundamental rights. The third important case is Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. This is of 1965, page number 845. The Supreme Court reiterated its stance from Shankari Prasad and upheld the amendment power of the Parliament. The fourth important case is Golaknath versus State of Punjab. This case is of 1967, given on page number 762. The Supreme Court ruled that Parliament could not amend the fundamental right. The next very important case is Keshwanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, 1973 Supreme Court, page number 225. This landmark case introduced the basic structure doctrine, stating that Parliament cannot alter the basic structure of the Constitution. The sixth case in line is Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. This is of 1975 Supreme Court cases, page number 1. The Supreme Court declared the election of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi void, which led to significant constitutional changes. The next important case is Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India. This is of 1978, given on page number 597. This judgment expanded the interpretation of right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 to include right to live with human dignity. The eighth case is Minerva Mill versus Union of India. This is of 1980, page number 625. The Supreme Court reinforced the basic structure doctrine and struck down a constitutional amendment that attempted to negate the judgment in Keshwanand Bharti. The next leading case is S.R. Bommai versus Union of India. This is of 1994 Supreme Court cases, page number 1. A landmark judgment that defined the use of Article 356 of the Constitution and put restrictions on the President rule to prevent its misuse. The recent cases of Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India 2017 Supreme Court cases, page number 1. This recent judgment affirmed the right to privacy as a fundamental right under the Constitution. Now, I will be discussing with you challenges and future prospects. The history and making of Indian Constitution is a narrative of resilience and vision, reflecting India's journey from the colonial subjugation to sovereign democracy. The Constitution, drafted by a diverse and representative Constituent Assembly, encapsulates the philosophical ethos and aspirations of the Indian people. However, this foundational document faces contemporary challenge that test its adaptability and relevance. Issues such as social and economic inequalities, political dynamics, and the balance between judicial activism and parliamentary sovereignty poses significant challenges. The federal structure too is under scrutiny as debates over the distribution of powers between the centre and states intensify. Looking ahead, the Constitution's future prospects lies in its ability to evolve. Constitutional reform, expansions in the scope of fundamental rights, and stronger provisions for decentralization are on horizon. The emphasis on the inclusive growth and sustainable development, coupled with India's growing influence on global constitutionalism, suggests a dynamic future for the Constitution. As India continues to navigate the complexity of a changing world, the Constitution remains the bedrock of its democratic ethos, guiding the nation towards a more just and equitable society. The ongoing discourse on constitutional amendment and the need for executive efficiency signal a vigorous engagement with the document's provisions and its role in governance. As India stands at the crossroads of tradition and modernity, the Constitution will undoubtedly play a pivotal role in shaping the country's destiny. Concluding my topic, I would like to say the history and making of the Constitution of India is a monumental chapter in the annals of Indian democracy. It is the story of collective resolve, visionary leadership, and an unwavering commitment to the principle of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. The Constituent Assembly, through rigorous debate and consensus building, crafted a document that not only reflects the historical imperatives of post-colonial India, but also embrace the best practice from the Constitution around the world. The Indian Constitution stands as a beacon of hope and a guiding framework for a nation that is diverse, dynamic, and determined to uphold the rule of law. As India continues to evolve, the Constitution remains a living document, resilient enough to withstand the test of time while being amenable to changes when necessary. It encapsulates the spirit of nation that is rooted in its cultural heritage, yet forward looking in its democratic ethos. The journey of the Indian Constitution from its conception to its adoption and its ongoing interpretation is a testament to the enduring strength of India's democratic institution and the collective will of its people. It is this very adaptability and robustness that ensure the Constitution remains relevant and responsive to the aspiration of future generation, guiding India's path towards a more inclusive and equitable society. In conclusion, the history and making of the Indian Constitution is not just a historical event, but a continuous process of national building and governance, shaping the destiny of the world's largest democracy. I hope the lecture is useful for you. Thank you and have a nice day.